Hello, everybody. It's time for the read aloud today. Now we're going to pick up with books 9 and 10. And if you'll remember the last book we read of this epic poem, the Trojans had charged out of Troy thinking they were triumphant and had corralled the Greeks behind their ramparts. And at daylight, they were going to go storm the camp and burn the ships. But do you guys really think that's what's going to happen? These meddling gods. So we're going to look at book 9. And one thing I always want to point out is, you see the IX there? That's Roman numerals. I learned how to count those by my Final Fantasies. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They're all done by Roman numerals. It's not something that's really taught too much, I don't think. You'll learn it. It's not a 4th grade thing, but I think maybe next year. Anyway, book 9. Inside their camp that night, the Greeks could not sleep as they were worried. The sentries paced the ramparts, silently watching the fires as they were lit by the Trojans and listening to their songs of victory. The Greek princes were holding a meeting in Agamemnon's tent. Never in 9 years of war had they suffered such a bitter defeat. "I had not suspected such fighting fury from the Trojans," mumbled Agamemnon, disheartened. "I really didn't know they had it in them. It must be a sign from the heavens. Zeus is telling us that we shall never take Troy." "Do not speak so. We shall take Troy even if I must do it alone with my charioteer Sthenelus," replied Diomedes harshly. Old Nestor intervened. "It is not with words that one fights. Agamemnon, you are discouraged, and it is understandable. But remember, we are battling without Achilles, and without his mighty arm. Like it or not, we cannot hope to win. I shall be frank with you. You have offended him. It is now up to you to make peace with him." Remember, he took his favorite slave away. After a moment of silence, Agamemnon whispered, "Yes, I must admit I have offended Achilles. He has refused to fight, and that is the cause of our defeat. Friends," he went on, "I know I was wrong, but I am your king and leader. Hear then what I have to say to you, and I hope that by tomorrow Achilles will go back to battle." Soon after, Nestor, Aias, and Odysseus left Agamemnon's tent and, walking along the seashore, headed towards Achilles' campsite, well guarded by the myrmidons of the long spears. Achilles was in his tent with his good friend Patroclus. They were unarmed, and their armor, shields, leggings, and helmets stood in the corner of the tent. Sitting on a bench, Achilles was playing his lyre, humming ancient songs which told of war and heroic feats, while Patroclus listened in silence. It was as though they were 1,000 miles from Troy and the bloody battlefield, but in Achilles' heart, anger and contempt still burnt. At the sight of Nestor, Aias, and Odysseus, the young man at once put down his lyre, stood to his feet with a smile, and stretched out his arms. "Friends!" he exclaimed, "what a joy it is to see you again! Come, and you, Patroclus, pour some of the reddest and purest wine. Odysseus, Aias, wise Nestor, drink and eat with me." And so they ate and drank and talked as though nothing had happened the past few days. And at last, raising his cup to Achilles, Odysseus said, "Friend, it is not only to drink that we have come. We have been holding a conference in Agamemnon's tent. Achilles, glory of all the Greece, Agamemnon has sent us to tell you that he admits to his error. He admits that he has offended you by taking away Briseis from you, whom you had well deserved by your courage. If you will go back to battle, he is ready to return her to you. Not only that, but when Troy is sacked, you will have the privilege of choosing 20 slaves from among the most beautiful Trojan maidens, and when we sail back to Greece, you may marry one of Agamemnon's daughters." Pretty sweet deal, huh? "You will be Achilles, son-in-law of the king of all Greeks. This is what we have come to tell you. We are asking you to fight again." Odysseus had spoken. He was now quiet. A long silence followed, and Achilles replied in a low tone, "Odysseus, you have been frank with me, so I shall be frank with you. You have been sent by the man I hate more than anyone in this world. He had my trust, he has lost it. He had my friendship, he has lost it. He has shown that he possessed neither generosity nor loyalty. I have served him faithfully, and as a reward he has taken away my precious Briseis, the girl whom I loved. Agamemnon will never be able to convince me of his change of heart. He sent you to me because he has not understood that he was unfair, but only because he has suffered a bitter defeat on the battleground. Let him fight on alone against Hector. Anyway," the young man went on, "I shall soon be off. I shall soon be leaving this land where I certainly never came of my own free will." "Achilles," Odysseus began to say, but Achilles continued, "My mother, Thetis, hearing that I was leaving for Troy, told me that by coming here to fight I would find death and with it eternal glory. And she added that if I did not take part in the war, my life would instead be a long and happy one. Well, I have changed my mind. I now choose a long and happy life, and I advise you all to do the same. It is useless to carry on. You will never conquer Troy." An astounded silence followed those words. Odysseus and his companions tried in vain to convince Achilles to change his mind. So after they had drunk a last cup of wine, the three of them went back to Agamemnon with the bitter answer. Achilles was not giving in. He was still angered. He would not return to fight. Book 10. In the still of the night, the soldiers, exhausted by their day of fighting, had laid down on the ground to rest and sleep. But not all were asleep. Anxiety kept Agamemnon awake. The Trojans had stirred along the wall not far from the ships. What were they up to? They would surely attack, but when? Tonight? Tomorrow? Never had Hector come so close. With a somber face, Agamemnon watched the many fires the Trojans had lit on the plain. The danger was great, and the Greeks might well be doomed to disaster. At last the king came to a decision. He could no longer contain his anguish, and so he went out to each of his leaders' tents and called them out one by one for yet another war meeting. "It is necessary," he began, "to know what the Trojans' intentions are, whether they will attack tonight or wait until tomorrow. Our troops are tired and most of them are asleep. We must know if we can let them sleep or if we must line them up for battle." Odysseus and Diomedes volunteered to go and spy on the Trojans. Stealthily they crept out through a small door in the wall, and walking silently across the plain littered with corpses and weapons, they came close to the fires. Suddenly Odysseus held back his companion and whispered, "Stop! I think I can hear someone coming." He was right. A shadow appeared out of the darkness, and they saw the glint of armor. Diomedes leapt forward, brandishing his spear. "Stop!" he shouted. "Who goes there?" The man stopped and fearfully implored, "Don't harm me! Spare me!" "Who are you? Speak up if you don't want to die where you stand." "My name is Dolan. Hector sent me. I was told to creep into your camp," replied the man with a trembling voice, "to find out what you were doing, whether you were going to fight again or were preparing to leave." "Ah, so you think you have defeated us once and for all?" "No, Dolan, we are not leaving. But speak up. Have you perhaps received reinforcements to feel so sure of yourselves?" Dolan, who had accepted the spying mission to the Greek camp only because he had been offered a handsome reward, replied, "Yes, the Thracians have come, led by their king Rhesus. They are camping over there on the right. Rhesus," he added, "owns 2 beautiful white horses, the loveliest I have ever seen. But please let me go. He was not able to finish his sentence. Diomedes had struck him a fatal blow with his sword. "If that one had reported back to Hector, we would have been done for," he explained. "But come, Odysseus, let us bid welcome to the Thracians." They walked and reached the Trojan camp. Some soldiers were armed, others were asleep. The two heroes slipped unseen and noiselessly toward the still tents and headed for the enclosure where several horses slept. Yes, Dolan had spoken the truth. The 2 big thoroughbreds were certainly the most handsome creatures ever seen under the walls of Troy. Ah, if only they could take them back to their camp as loot. What a boast it would be! "I'll take care of the beasts," whispered Odysseus. "You take care of the men." Diomedes nodded and moved stealthily toward a huge tent. Meanwhile, Odysseus, crawling on the ground, reached the enclosure and found a way in. He moved slowly and cautiously among the horses so they wouldn't feel his presence and start to paw and whinny. He had reached the splendid white horses that belonged to King Rhesus. At that moment, Diomedes had penetrated the Thracian quarters. As soon as they had arrived, the Thracians had retired to bed in order to be fresh for the next day's battle. It was indeed ill luck to have joined at the moment of victory. Ill luck because, feeling very bold and sure of themselves, they had not even remembered to put out sentries to watch over the camp. The terrible Diomedes unsheathed his sword and, since in times of war any action which can harm the enemy and undermine his strength is fully justified, one by one killed at least 12 warriors in their sleep, among whom was the young King Rhesus, who had come to Troy hoping to find glory and was instead slaughtered like a lamb. Diomedes would have continued his massacre had he not feared someone might wake up and raise the alarm. Thinking that Odysseus had already got hold of the horses, he decided to return, his sword still dripping with blood. Odysseus was waiting impatiently for him to return. "Quick, the Trojans are everywhere. If they find us, all is lost." "At least 12 of them, and Rhesus among them, will never find out anything," replied Diomedes with a sneer. "Come, let's take the chariot and leave." They harnessed the 2 horses to Rhesus' chariot, lashed the animals on, and made their way back to the Greek camp. Their screams and the noise of the hooves woke the Thracian soldiers, who discovered the men slaughtered in their sleep. The alarm was promptly raised, and all the Trojan princes and Hector came running. Alas, it was too late. Rhesus lay dead in a pool of his own blood, and the cloud of dust visible in the night showed that his murderers were in full flight, taking with them the 2 splendid horses. Such was war. They weep on one side, they rejoice on the other. So the Trojan camp was in mourning, whilst the Greeks celebrated Odysseus' and Diomedes' mission with wine and song. So ends Book 10. There is a saying, all's fair in love and war. Kind of a sneaky, dirty move to do that to those guys in their sleep, huh? Now remember, guys, this is just a story, okay? It's kind of showing you the horrors of a war like this.